My name is Claire Whitman, and until that afternoon, I believed there were only two kinds of family moments. The ones you prepare for, and the ones that quietly prepare you to leave. The wedding was supposed to be the first kind. I arrived early, like I always do. Early enough to help, early enough to smooth things over, early enough to make myself useful before anyone remembered to ask. The vineyard smelled like crushed grapes and fresh linen. Rows of white chairs curved toward an altar framed in pale roses and eucalyptus. Everything looked soft, intentional, expensive. Everything looked like it had been rehearsed. I stood near the welcome table, adjusting place cards that didn't need adjusting, when I noticed my name wasn't where it should have been. At first, I assumed it was a mistake. That happens at weddings. Ink smudges. Cards get shuffled. People panic and forget things. I told myself that as I scanned the table again, slowly this time. Claire Whitman wasn't listed under the bridal party. She wasn't listed under immediate family. She wasn't listed at all. I felt that familiar tightening in my chest, the one that always showed up before I made excuses for other people. I turned just as my brother Mark walked toward me. He looked sharp in his tailored suit, hair perfectly styled, boutonniere pinned just right. He didn't look nervous. He looked efficient, like someone checking items off a list. "Hey," I said, forcing a smile. "Quick question. I think my card's missing." He stopped in front of me. Not too close. Not too far. The way people stand when they're about to deliver news they've already justified to themselves. "Oh," he said. "Yeah. About that." That was when I noticed the envelope in his hand. It was plain. No name. No ribbon. Just a thick, cream-colored envelope held between his fingers like a task, not a gift. "We all talked," he continued, "and we agreed it would be better if you weren't in the wedding party." The words landed cleanly. No hesitation. No apology. I waited for the rest of the sentence. The explanation. The softener. Something. Nothing came. "I'm not in the wedding party?" I repeated. He nodded. "Not officially. It's just, today's already complicated. We're trying to keep things simple." Simple. Behind him, laughter drifted from the bridal suite. Someone popped champagne. A photographer called out instructions. The wedding was moving forward, perfectly on schedule. I realized then that this conversation had been scheduled too. "I thought I was standing with Mom," I said quietly. Mark glanced past me, toward the rows of chairs. "We figured you'd be more comfortable sitting toward the back. Less pressure." Less pressure. As if visibility were a burden I'd failed to carry correctly. I looked down at the envelope. "What's that?" He finally met my eyes. Just for a second. "This is for you," he said, and handed it to me. The envelope was heavier than it looked. "For me?" I asked. "Yes. We didn't want this to feel abrupt." I almost laughed at that. Almost. Around us, guests were arriving. A few nodded at me, smiling politely, already dressed in the language of celebration. Someone brushed past my shoulder and apologized without really seeing me. I held the envelope but didn't open it. "So," I said, choosing my words carefully, "I helped plan the engagement party, coordinate the rehearsal dinner, manage the guest overflow, and now I'm, what? A guest." Mark exhaled, the way people do when they're tired of defending something they don't want to revisit. "Claire, don't do this right now." "Do what?" "Make it about you." That one stung. Not because it was new, but because it was familiar. "I'm not making it about me," I said. "I'm trying to understand where I fit." He hesitated. Then he said it. "You don't today." The sentence hung between us, fragile and final. I nodded slowly. "Okay." He looked relieved. "Thank you. Really." This means a lot. I watched him walk away, already absorbed back into the machinery of the wedding, and for a moment I just stood there, envelope in hand, surrounded by flowers I'd helped choose and music I'd approved weeks ago. I felt strangely calm. I moved toward the edge of the vineyard, where the chairs ended and the grass dipped slightly downhill. From there, I could see everything without being seen too clearly myself. I finally opened the envelope. Inside was a single folded document. Not a letter. Not a note. Not an apology. My breath caught as I scanned the first line. Mark had said the envelope was meant to soften the moment. He was wrong. It wasn't there to soften anything. It was there to end something. And I knew, standing there with the wedding about to begin and my name quietly erased from the day, that whatever came next would not be simple. Not for them. And not for me. I didn't open the document right away. Not because I was afraid of what it said, but because I'd learned something about my family over the years. The truth always waited until you were alone to do the most damage. So I folded the paper back into the envelope and slid it into my clutch. The ceremony music started a few minutes later. Soft strings floated over the vineyard, delicate and practiced. Guests stood, heads turned toward the aisle. I stayed where I was, just outside the neat rows of chairs, close enough to hear the vows, far enough to be forgettable. That seemed intentional. My mother passed me on her way to the front row. She paused when she saw me standing instead of seated. "Claire," she whispered, eyes darting. "Why aren't you up front?" I smiled. The kind of smile you learn when honesty will cause a scene. There was a small change. Her forehead creased. "What kind of change?" Mark's voice cut in before I could answer. "Mom, can you sit? We're starting." She looked between us, confused, but the music swelled and the moment closed. She sat. I remained standing. The ceremony was beautiful. That was the cruelest part. Mark's vows were steady. His fiancée, Lila, cried softly in the way photographers love. The crowd sighed at the right moments. Applause rose on cue. No one noticed that I wasn't where I was supposed to be. By the time the recessional ended, my legs ached and my chest felt hollow, like something essential had been carefully removed while everyone was distracted. I left before the cocktail hour began. Not dramatically. Not in tears. I simply turned and walked toward the gravel lot where my car was parked, heels crunching softly against the ground. Behind me, laughter erupted, glasses clinked, a band struck its first note. I sat in my car for a long minute before starting the engine. Then my phone buzzed. "Mark." I let it ring. Another buzz. A text this time. "Mark, you okay? I know that was awkward. Please don't make today harder than it needs to be." I stared at the screen, then tossed the phone onto the passenger seat. I drove home with the windows down, letting the wind tangle my hair and the noise drown out the thoughts I didn't want to finish yet. My apartment felt too quiet when I walked in. I kicked off my shoes, dropped my clutch on the kitchen counter, and finally took out the envelope. I sat down at the table before opening it, like my body knew I'd need the support. The document inside wasn't long. 2 pages. Typed. Clean. Formal. The title alone made my stomach drop. Declaration of Responsibility and Release. I skimmed faster than I should have, heart pounding as the words started to make sense. It wasn't a gift. It wasn't an explanation. It was paperwork. The document stated that I had been listed as a secondary guarantor on several wedding-related contracts. Venue upgrades. Vendor overages. A short-term credit extension arranged to streamline payments. My name. My signature. Only I hadn't signed any of it. The last paragraph requested that I formally acknowledge my role and agree to release any future claims in exchange for amicable family resolution. I laughed once. Out loud. A sharp, humorless sound. They hadn't just removed me from the wedding. They'd positioned me behind it. I flipped to the final page. Attached was a photocopy of a signature that looked like mine if you didn't know how I looped my letters when I was tired. I felt cold. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Lila. I answered. "Hey," she said quickly, too quickly. "I heard you left. I just wanted to make sure you weren't upset." "About what?" I asked. There was a pause. "About the arrangement." I closed my eyes. "Did you know about this document?" Another pause. Longer. "Mark handled the logistics," she said carefully. I stayed out of that part. I thought of all the times I'd stayed in things I shouldn't have. The times I'd smoothed, paid, covered, adjusted. "Lila," I said, my voice steady. "Did you know my name was used on your contracts?" She exhaled. "It was supposed to be temporary." Temporary. Like feelings. Like trust. "I need you to understand something," I said. "Whatever this is, it ends now." Silence crackled on the line. "I'll have Mark call you," she said finally. "No," I replied. "I'll call someone else." I hung up and stared at the document again. This time, not as a shock, but as evidence. My phone lit up with messages. My mother. An aunt. A cousin asking why I wasn't in the family photos. I ignored them all. Instead, I opened my laptop and searched my email. It didn't take long. Invoices. Payment confirmations. Threads labeled "Quick Fix" and "Backup Plan." A pattern emerged, neat and undeniable. I hadn't been excluded because I was inconvenient. I'd been excluded because I was useful, but only from a distance. I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling as the weight of it all settled. Mark thought the envelope would keep me quiet. What it actually did was give me clarity. And once you have that, there's no going back to being polite. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was spiraling, but because my mind had switched modes. There's a point after shock where emotions stop asking for comfort and start asking for structure. That's where I was. I brewed coffee at 2:14 a.m. and opened my laptop again. This time, I wasn't looking for reassurance. I was looking for patterns. I created a folder and named it simply, Wedding. Then I started pulling everything into it. Emails first. Mark had always been casual in writing. Short sentences, friendly punctuation, lots of quick question subject lines. I filtered by his name and scrolled back 6 months. There it was. "Hey Claire, can you cover this and I'll Venmo you back? Vendor needs a placeholder, can you front it? Just temporary, promise." Temporary had stretched into months. Next were the contracts. Most were addressed to Mark and Lila, but the payment sections told a different story. My email. My billing address. My authorization codes. Always just enough involvement to keep things moving, never enough to give me visibility. I opened my bank app. I hadn't wanted to do that part. Money has a way of making betrayal feel measurable, and I wasn't sure I was ready to see numbers attached to feelings. But there they were. 4 figures. Then 5. Then another 5. Each transfer labeled with something disarming. Venue support. Family assist. Short-term help. Language mattered. They never called it what it was. By dawn, the folder was full. I leaned back and rubbed my eyes. Outside, the city was waking up. Somewhere, my brother and his new wife were probably asleep in a hotel suite paid for with reward points and someone else's credit. My phone buzzed again. "Mom." I answered this time. "Claire," she said, her voice tight. "Why didn't you tell me you were upset?" "I wasn't upset," I said. I was excluded. That's not what Mark said. What did he say? That you didn't want the attention, that you asked to step back. I let that sit for a moment. Then I laughed. Not sharply this time. Softly. Almost tired. Did he also say he put my name on his contracts? Silence. Mom. I pressed. I didn't know about that, she said quickly. Too quickly. Why would he do that? I closed my eyes. Because I didn't say no. Another pause. Longer this time. You've always been generous, she said. We didn't think. You didn't think I'd notice, I corrected. Her voice sharpened. This is not the time to accuse your brother. He just got married. And I just found out my signature was forged. That landed. Oh, she said. Yes, I replied. Oh. She sighed. Let me talk to your father. Please don't, I said. Not yet. After we hung up, I sat there, staring at my reflection in the dark screen of my laptop. I looked older than I had the day before. Not broken, just resolved. By mid-morning, messages started coming in waves. An aunt asking if I was feeling okay. A cousin hinting that weddings are stressful and forgiveness is important. Lila texting, Mark says you're overthinking this. I didn't respond. Instead, I called a lawyer. Her name was Denise Carter. A friend of a friend. Calm voice. No wasted words. I explained the situation. I emailed the documents. She called me back an hour later. This isn't a misunderstanding, she said. It's misuse of identity. My hands trembled slightly, but my voice stayed steady. What are my options? You can walk away quietly, she said. Or you can correct the record. What does correcting the record look like? Revoking authorizations. Freezing anything tied to your name. And if you want, formal notice. I looked around my apartment. The quiet. The safety. The space I'd paid for on my own. I want it clean, I said. Not loud. Just accurate. Denise paused. That's usually the most effective kind. That afternoon, I drove back to the venue. Not to confront anyone. Not yet. I walked the grounds slowly, like a visitor. I watched staff dismantle chairs, load equipment, sweep petals from the aisle. The wedding was over. The illusion was already dissolving. I spoke to the coordinator. Casually. Asked a few questions. She confirmed what I already knew. Payments pending. Final balances unpaid. Authorizations tied to my name. I thanked her and left. On the drive home, something settled into place. Mark hadn't handed me that envelope to protect me. He'd handed it to protect himself. He'd underestimated one thing. Me. That evening, I laid everything out on my dining table. Documents. Printouts. Notes. I highlighted dates, circled amounts, annotated timelines. This wasn't anger. This was accounting. By the time the sun set, I had a clear picture of what had happened and what needed to happen next. I picked up the envelope again, the same one Mark had given me with such careful neutrality. It wasn't an ending. It was a trigger. And the wedding, I realized, wasn't the climax of this story. It was just the opening act. The hardest part wasn't deciding what to do. It was deciding how little I was willing to explain. I met Denise the next morning at her office. Glass walls. Clean desk. No family photos. I appreciated that immediately. She reviewed everything again, slower this time, marking pages with small colored tabs. You were excluded publicly, she said. But you were included financially. That matters. I don't want revenge, I told her. I know, she said. That's why this will work. We drafted notices. Not dramatic ones. Not threatening ones. Just precise. Language stripped of emotion. Authorization revoked. Liability denied. Accounts frozen pending clarification. Truth written in ink tends to scare people more than shouting ever could. By noon, the emails were scheduled. Vendors. Financial institutions. The venue. Everyone who had touched a contract with my name on it. Denise looked at me over her glasses. Once these go out, things will move quickly. I know. And your family will react. I smiled faintly. They already have. I just haven't replied yet. On my drive home, my phone buzzed again. Mark. I let it ring. Then again. Then a text. Mark, why are vendors calling me? What did you do? I pulled over before replying. Me, I corrected the paperwork. 3 dots appeared immediately. Mark, Claire, this is not the time for this. We can talk later. Later. The word people use when they mean never. Me, we already did. You gave me the envelope. There was a long pause. Then, Mark, you're blowing this out of proportion. I didn't answer. Instead, I forwarded Denise the message. Within the hour, the reactions escalated. The florist emailed, confused. The venue called, concerned. The photographer sent a polite inquiry asking who now held financial responsibility. I didn't answer any of them directly. Denise did. That afternoon, my mother showed up at my apartment unannounced. I watched her through the peephole for a moment before opening the door. She looked smaller than usual, less composed. Her hair wasn't done the way it always was for public events. "Can I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside. She sat at the kitchen table where the documents had been the night before. I'd cleared them away, but the indentation remained, like the table remembered. "This is spiraling," she said without preamble. "People are calling your father." "I know," I replied calmly. "Mark is beside himself." I poured water into 2 glasses and slid one toward her. "He should read the contracts." Her mouth tightened. "He didn't mean to hurt you. He meant to use me quietly," I said. "That's worse." She shook her head. "Families help each other." "Yes," I said, "with consent." She looked at me then. Really looked. And something flickered there, recognition, maybe, or fear. "You always handled things so well," she said softly. "We assumed." "You assumed I'd absorb it," I finished. Silence stretched between us. Finally, she asked, "What do you want?" The question surprised me with its simplicity. "I want my name detached," I said. "From their finances. From their narrative. From the idea that love equals access." She nodded slowly. "And if this ruins things?" I met her gaze. "They ruined them when they handed me the envelope." She left shortly after, promising to talk to your father. I didn't stop her. That night, Mark showed up. I didn't open the door this time. He knocked harder. "Claire, please." I stood on the other side, hand on the doorknob, but I didn't turn it. "Say what you need to say," I told him through the wood. "This is insane," he snapped. "You're embarrassing us." I closed my eyes. There it was. "I wasn't in the photos," I said quietly. "How could I embarrass you?" He went silent. "You could have just signed it," he finally said. "No one would have gotten hurt." I felt something loosen in my chest. Not pain. Clarity. "That's the difference between us," I said. "You think harm only counts if people see it." I heard his breath on the other side of the door. heavy, frustrated. This was supposed to be simple, he muttered. It was, I replied, until you needed me invisible. I stepped back from the door. I'll have my lawyer contact you, I added. Please don't come here again. He didn't knock after that. By morning, the fallout was in full motion. Vendors suspended services. Final invoices went unanswered. The honeymoon suite charged a cancellation fee. None of it touched me anymore, because none of it was mine. I sat at my kitchen table with coffee and sunlight streaming in through the window, and for the first time since the wedding, I felt steady. Not triumphant. Unentangled. And I knew the next step wouldn't be quiet. It would be public. Not because I wanted it to be, but because truth, once uninvited, has a way of taking up space. The venue called me at 9:17 a.m. I didn't answer, not because I was afraid, but because I already knew why they were calling. By 9:22, Denise texted. Denise, they're scrambling. Coordinator wants clarification in person. Your call. I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed. Me, I'll go. I didn't dress for confrontation. I dressed for accuracy. Black blazer. White shirt. Hair pulled back. No jewelry except my watch. I wanted nothing about me to feel emotional, dramatic, or apologetic. The venue looked different in daylight without celebration to soften it. Chairs stacked. Floral arrangements wilting slightly at the edges. The aftermath of something that had tried very hard to look perfect. The coordinator, her name was Julia, met me near the main hall. Thank you for coming, she said, visibly relieved. We're just trying to understand who's responsible for the remaining balances. I handed her a folder. You're looking at it, I said calmly. Or rather, you were. She flipped through the documents. Revocation notices. Email confirmations. Time stamps. Her lips parted slightly. This changes things. Yes, I replied. That's the point. Behind us, I heard hurried footsteps. Mark. He looked wrecked. Tie gone. Jacket wrinkled. The version of him that never appeared in photos. What are you doing here? He demanded. I turned slowly, closing the loop. You can't just show up and do this, he said, gesturing wildly. People are watching. I glanced around. Staff. Vendors. A few curious guests who hadn't yet left town. I know, I said. That's why I came. Julia stepped back instinctively, sensing she'd become an audience to something larger than logistics. Mark lowered his voice. You're punishing us. No, I corrected. I'm removing myself. He scoffed. After everything we've done for you? The words landed wrong. I opened the folder again and pulled out a single page, the same document he'd handed me in the envelope. I want to be very clear, I said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. This was not a gift. This was an attempt to bind me financially without my consent. Julia's eyes flicked to Mark. That's not what it was, he snapped. It was just a formality. Forgery is not a formality, I said evenly. The word rippled outward. People shifted. Someone whispered. Mark's face drained of color. You're really going to do this here? You already did, I replied, when you decided I shouldn't be seen, but should still pay. For a moment, he looked genuinely lost. Like someone realizing the ground had rules he'd never bothered to learn. This was supposed to protect everyone, he said weakly. I nodded once. It did. Just not you. Julia cleared her throat. Mr. Whitman, she said carefully, we'll need updated authorization immediately. Otherwise, services remain suspended. Mark turned on her. You can't be serious. She didn't flinch. I am. That was when my mother arrived. She rushed toward us, eyes wide, voice already breaking. Please. Please don't do this here. I looked at her, really looked, and saw fear, not concern. Fear of optics. Fear of questions. This isn't punishment, I said gently. This is correction. She reached for my arm. I stepped back. I spent years confusing access with love, I continued. The envelope helped me see the difference. Mark laughed bitterly. You're acting like a victim. I met his eyes. I'm acting like someone who read the fine print. Silence followed. Then something unexpected happened. Lila stepped forward. She hadn't spoken yet. She looked smaller without her wedding makeup, less composed. More human. She's right, she said quietly. Everyone turned. I didn't want to see it, Lila admitted. But I knew. I knew we were leaning on her. Mark stared at her. Lila. No, she interrupted. You said it would be temporary. You said Claire wouldn't mind. Her voice shook. You never asked her. The truth doesn't need volume. It just needs witnesses. I closed the folder and handed it to Julia. Please proceed according to the updated documentation. Julia nodded. Of course. Mark looked between us, panic flashing across his face. So that's it? You walk away and leave us with this mess. I thought about the envelope, about how he'd handed it to me like a solution. I didn't leave you a mess, I said. I returned it. I turned to go. Behind me, voices rose. Questions. Arguments. The sound of a carefully constructed moment collapsing under its own weight. I didn't look back. Because the envelope had already done its job. It hadn't silenced me. It had released me. The days after the venue confrontation were quieter than I expected. Not peaceful, just quiet in the way a room feels after furniture has been removed. You can still see where things used to be. You just don't trip over them anymore. My phone stayed face down on the counter. Messages came in anyway. My aunt asking if I was doing okay. A cousin suggesting we all take a break and regroup. My father leaving a voicemail I didn't listen to. I deleted it without opening the transcript. I wasn't angry. Anger requires energy, and I had finally stopped spending mine on people who mistook my endurance for consent. Denise called 2 days later. Everything tied to your name is cleanly severed, she said. No lingering liability. No future exposure. I thanked her and hung up. Then I sat on the floor of my living room and cried. Not the kind of crying that begs for relief. The kind that comes when your body finally realizes it's safe to stop bracing. Mark didn't reach out again. Neither did Lila. I heard updates through distance, the way you hear weather reports about places you no longer live. Vendors rebooked. Plans downsized. A honeymoon delayed. People calling it unfortunate, stressful, unfair. No one called it what it was. But I didn't need them to. A week later, my mother asked if we could talk. I agreed to meet her at a cafe halfway between our homes, neutral ground. She looked tired. Older than I remembered. She stirred her coffee without drinking it. You embarrassed your brother, she said softly. I nodded once. He embarrassed himself. Her lips pressed together. Families don't handle things this way. They do, I replied, when handling things quietly only benefits one side. She sighed. We raised you to be supportive. You raised me to be useful, I corrected gently. I became supportive on my own. She didn't argue. We sat there for a while, listening to the hum of other people's conversations, other people's problems. Finally, she asked, What happens now? I thought about that. Now, I said, I live without being a contingency plan. She didn't ask what that meant. Some truths don't need explanation, they just need to be honored. That night, I took the envelope out of my drawer one last time. The paper inside no longer made my chest tighten. It felt small now. Ordinary. I folded it carefully and placed it in the recycling bin. Not because I was pretending it hadn't happened, but because I didn't need proof of something I already understood. The envelope had never been meant to protect me. It had been meant to manage me. And once I refused that role, its power disappeared. Weeks passed. Life expanded into the space that had been cleared. I slept better, ate slower, said no without rehearsing apologies in my head. When friends asked how I was doing, I didn't minimize anymore. I told the truth, calmly. I'm lighter, I said. I didn't realize how heavy things were until I put them down. One evening, I ran into an old friend at the grocery store. She hugged me and said, I heard about what happened. You were so brave. I smiled politely. It wasn't bravery. It was boundaries. Those don't look heroic. They look boring. They look like paperwork and silence and walking away when someone expects you to stay small. And that's why they work. I never did get an apology from Mark, but I stopped waiting for one. Because apologies without accountability are just another envelope, handed over to end a conversation without changing its outcome. Months later, I attended a wedding for someone else. Smaller. Simpler. No spectacle. No performance. I sat in the front row because I was invited there, not because I paid. As the couple exchanged vows, I felt something loosen inside me, not envy, not grief, but clarity. Love doesn't erase you to function. Family doesn't ask you to disappear to be convenient. And if it does, the cost is too high. When I got home that night, I placed my keys on the counter and looked around my apartment. The quiet no longer echoed. It rested. I realized something then. Being kicked out of my brother's wedding wasn't the worst thing that happened to me. Believing I had to earn my place was. The envelope didn't end my role in the ceremony. It ended my role in the pattern. And that, finally, felt like an invitation worth accepting.